Entering 2024, the Baltimore Orioles received extreme hype and were considered one of the favorites to make it to and win the World Series. Now, October 15th, the team is sitting at home during the ALCS. This leads to many questions, which all result in one: what went wrong? First, let's begin before the season started, specifically February 1st. The Baltimore Orioles traded for star pitcher Corbin Burnes from the Milwaukee Brewers in exchange for prospects DL Hall and Joey Ortiz, both of which contributed, more of which Joey Ortiz. Fans of the team were elated. The new ownership team had already made a huge impact, just one day after they had bought the team. Vibes were high throughout spring training, with the only injuries being Kyle Bradish, who had an elbow injury but was supposed to return, and a report that John Means was not fully ready to return yet, but he would return. This was not that big of a deal, as the Orioles were comfortable with the rotation of Corbin Burnes, Grayson Rodriguez, Dean Kramer, Cole Irvin, and Tyler Wells. They could handle it for a few weeks until Bradish and Means could return. Another thing to be excited about was the potential calling up of number one prospect Jackson Holliday and potentially Kobe Mayo sometime during the season. Of course, Jackson Holliday didn't make the opening day roster and was called up later, but the hype was still there. The season finally began with a series against the Angels in Baltimore. The Orioles' offense was alive and well, scoring 24 runs combined through the first two games, while eventually losing Game 3 of the series 4-1. Corbin Burnes impressed in his first start, striking out 11 while only allowing a solo homer to Mike Trout in the first inning. The next series, the Orioles hosted the Kansas City Royals, walking the Royals off twice in 3 games. A major talking point through the first two series were the extreme struggles of Austin Hayes and Ramon Urias at the plate, while many calling for them to be either demoted to the minors or traded. Eventually, Hayes was put on the IL and kind of helped later in the season, but was eventually traded to the Phillies. And Urias, his defense was too valuable to get rid of, and eventually his bat heated up. During the series in Boston just a few series later, an unexpected breakout player began to shine. In the third game of the series, on April 11th, Colton Cowser began his tear on the league, hitting his first 2 career homers and going 3 for 5 with 4 RBIs in an extra innings blowout. Cowser continued to shine throughout the season, specifically with the glove in left field, now being a Gold Glove finalist. And he is also one of the favorites to win Rookie of the Year, which would be the Orioles' second straight. Skipping to the end of April now, the Orioles sat atop the AL East at 19-10. However, no one really looked at that. They were focused on 2 storylines. The first being, of course, the struggles of Jackson Holliday. He made his debut on April 10th and batted .074 through his first stint in the minors, and then was sent back down to AAA on April 24th. The other storyline for the first month was Albert Suarez. A former pitcher for the San Francisco Giants, Albert Suarez was out of the MLB for multiple years. He played in Korea to continue playing baseball, and eventually the Orioles signed Albert in late 2023 and stashed him in their farm system. On April 17th, Suarez pitched in the series finale against the Minnesota Twins. Suarez pitched 5 2/3 innings and allowed 0 runs. The next start, he had another outing of 5 2/3 innings, allowing 0 runs. Suarez was the most reliable piece of the pitching rotation, whether it be from the bullpen or the starting rotation. He did whatever the Orioles needed him to do. Without Albert Suarez, the injuries that we'll talk about later, they would have been even more detrimental than they already were. On May 2nd, the long-awaited debut of Kyle Bradish happened. He pitched 4 2/3 innings and allowed 1 earned run, which is pretty decent for coming back from an elbow injury. However, just a month and a half later, on June 19th, Bradish went under the knife again, having Tommy John surgery after tearing his UCL. Just like that, there was one starter gone. But it wasn't done there. On May 31st, John Means and Tyler Wells underwent Tommy John surgery as well. And then there was 3 out. The last of these injuries for this time period was Danny Coulombe. Danny Coulombe is one of the best high-leverage relievers the Orioles had, and of course he was a lefty. He went out in the middle of June with bone chips in his elbow and did not return until late September, leaving them without a high-leverage left-handed reliever. Despite all these injuries, the Orioles sat at 58-38 at the All-Star break, good enough for first in the AL. In the All-Star game, the Orioles had Gunnar Henderson, who also hit in the home run derby, who looked like an MVP candidate. They had Adley Rutschman, Corbin Burns, Jordan Westburg, and standout Anthony Santander. Santander, who's on a contract year, raked throughout the season, finishing with above 40 home runs. And specifically in the month of June, he hit 13 home runs in their gauntlet of a schedule. The Orioles came out of the break losing 2 of their first 3 series. One of these losses came in Miami to a lowly Marlins ball club. A consistent theme for weeks in this organization was the lack of hitting. Specifically, they had trouble hitting with runners on and in scoring position. Whether the reason be approach or something else, the issue remained and runs were not being scored. This remained a constant theme until around late July, specifically July 31st, when the vibes of the season began to change. Jackson Holliday had returned. His first game back, he hit a grand slam. However, one batter before that grand slam, Jordan Westburg was hit by a pitch on his hand, fracturing it. Westburg, who was a key defensive infielder and a consistent bat, was out until late September. Along with this, utility man and speedster Jorge Mateo hurt his elbow and was ruled out for the season as well. However, a few days earlier, the trade deadline had arrived, and the buying Orioles were looking for a few pieces to get them over the World Series hump. To start, the Orioles traded, as mentioned, Austin Hayes to the Philadelphia Phillies for reliever Sir Anthony Dominguez and outfielder Christian Pache. Pache was later DFA'd, but Dominguez became the Orioles' closer and was a great get for the Orioles. On the same day, the Orioles traded for starting pitcher Zach Eflin from the Tampa Bay Rays, just for a few prospects. It became clear throughout the season that this was the best pickup at the deadline by the Orioles, with Eflin becoming the new number 2 pitcher. On deadline day, the Orioles kept making moves. Trading cash for Eloy Jimenez and trading Seth Johnson for lefty reliever Gregory Soto, they kept adding to their roster. Lastly, and most controversially, the Orioles traded outfielder Kyle Stowers and infielder Connor Norby for struggling pitcher Trevor Rogers. Rogers was sent back down to the minors just a few weeks after the trade, with Norby becoming a star for the Marlins. Many fans began to call this trade terrible, as Norby had promise and Stowers had promise if they had opportunity. And Trevor Rogers, he made a few starts, and he continuously gave up runs and lost the Orioles games. After the deadline, the Orioles still had their sights set on one goal, that being a World Series. Despite this, injuries continued to pile up. On August 6th, Grayson Rodriguez was slated to be the starter for the Orioles. Grayson was scratched from the start just minutes before the first pitch, and Albert Suarez had to jump in and become the starter. Suarez pitched well. The Orioles lost the game, but that was not the story of the day. Grayson Rodriguez did not return for the rest of the season after he suffered an injury, shoulder injury. The next storyline came throughout the month of August. Their ace, Corbin Burns, began to unravel. In the month, Burns had an ERA of 7.5. With the Orioles already down so many starting pitchers, their ace struggling is the last thing they could have happen during their playoff push. And finally, eventually came September, and all Orioles fans could want just was the clinching of a playoff berth, because anything can happen in the playoffs once you make it. After a 2-1 series win against the White Sox to start the month, the Orioles went on to lose 5 straight series. These being against the Tampa Bay Rays, Boston Red Sox, Tigers twice, and the San Francisco Giants. Entering the last 2 series, which were at New York and at Minnesota, the magic number for the Orioles to make the playoffs was 2. Fans began to believe that missing the playoffs was actually possible, if not likely. On September 24th, however, the Orioles won the season opener against the Yankees in New York. All the Orioles needed now was a loss by the Minnesota Twins. The Twins lost, and the Orioles' ticket to the postseason was punched. In these last 6 games of the postseason, the Orioles' bats arrived, going 5-1. Fans began to think the team was back to prime form, back to the way they loved the team being. Along with this, Danny Coulombe and Jordan Westburg returned, and Burns was back to his prime form. The playoff picture was revealed, and the Orioles hosted the Royals in the wildcard series. Fans, confident in their team, were excited for Game 1 of this playoffs. Corbin Burns facing Royals ace Cole Reagans in Game 1 in a pitching duel. A combined 1 run was scored throughout the entirety of the game. Unluckily for the Orioles, this was off the bat of Bobby Witt, as he singled to the left side, scoring 1. The offense of the Orioles had shrunk in the moment, and now they were on the verge of elimination. The next day came Game 2, with Zach Eflin taking the mound to face Seth Lugo of the Royals. In the first, Vinny Pasquantino hit a weak single to score the first run of the game for the Royals. The Orioles' bats continued to be asleep until the bottom of the 5th. Leading off the 5th was veteran Cedric Mullins. On the 6th pitch of the at-bat, Mullins slammed a home run to right center field to tie the game at 1. Urias then singled, Henderson then walked, and then Westberg reached on an error. The Orioles had the bases loaded with nobody out, with the heart of the order due up. Santander came up and popped after the first baseman. The Royals then pulled Seth Lugo and put in Angel Zerpa. This was to platoon against Colton Cowser. Colton Cowser came up to the plate, and throughout the season, he excelled with nobody on base. This, of course, bases loaded, he struggled with people in scoring position specifically. A very high chase rate in these situations. Cowser struck out on 4 pitches, with the 4th pitch hitting him, breaking his hand. This means that if Cowser would have checked or even just took the pitch, the Orioles would have scored the run. With 2 outs, Adley Rutschman came up to the plate and promptly hit a ground ball to the shortstop Bobby Witt, ending the inning. Orioles fans were deflated. The only chance they thought to score had passed, just tying the game. In the top of the 6th, Cianel Perez came in relief of Zach Eflin and gave up a leadoff hit to Michael Massey, a 2-out hit to Michael Massey. He stole second, and then a single by Bobby Witt knocked in the game-winning run. The Orioles did not score again, finishing the postseason with 1 run scored in 2 games. A team that was once thought as a powerhouse, the World Series favorite, with all the talent in the world, flamed out quietly with no wins in the playoffs. Now, after the World Series ends, the team is tasked with heavy decisions. This being whether or not to re-sign Corbin Burns, Anthony Santander, and whether or not to bring back platoon bat Ryan O'Hearn along with others. The Orioles look to be poised for success in the near future. However, with performances like those during the second half of the season, the Orioles may not have that success for a while. I thank you guys for watching this video. I've been wanting to do a video about the Orioles season, and obviously I was waiting for the season to end. So here it is. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe. Check out me and my friend's podcast. It's the 3 Dudes and a Dad podcast. It's on Spotify and YouTube. Link will be in the description to the YouTube channel. And I want to make more videos. It just takes, I have to write the script, I have to do the research, make sure everything's right, find the videos, all that kind of stuff. And I have college to worry about. So I'm trying to, balance everything. But my goal is to make more videos, make more content, because I enjoy doing it once I do it. So hopefully it's not a long time before you see another video from me. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time, and see you guys.